Today is November 1st, 3 days before the election. And by this time next week, we will know who will lead our country into the next 4 years. Looking ahead, we know that those years are going to be tumultuous as we debate issues that are consuming the attention of the nation. But today is also All Souls Day, and it's a time when we look behind us and remember those who have passed on before now and what we learned from them. So I'm inviting you to lay down the burden of the future this morning. Just let it go for an hour or so. It is the past this morning that has more to tell us. And while you're laying down that burden of the future, I'd like you to think about what stories from your past, from your history, have influenced how you see the world and how you act in the world. Now, at the end of the service, we will hold up our candles to the screen and offer the names of those that we remember in love. And just as we would if we were here in person passing the chalice around the sanctuary, you can say pass if you would rather remember silently in your heart. Now, really, All Souls is not the only time for remembering. It's the time that we share here together, our memories. Because after all, we remember them. We remember them on their birthdays and on the days that they died. We remember them every time we see a ball game that would have loved, or hear a piece of music, or feel the changing air of the seasons, or look at holiday pictures. I love Underwood's idea of our souls as active presence, touching lives, connecting life, expending but never emptying, pouring warm rain on parched earth. And I think memories are the way that souls continue to touch our lives. Because we remember their stories and the times in which they lived. And, I think we use them on some conscious level, conscious or unconscious, as we try to figure out how the world works. So I ask you again to think back on who or maybe what time influenced your life. And now I'm going to offer up some questions, some spiritual questions. I've shared them with you before, but we spend our lives trying to answer them. They come from Reverend Robert Latham in his talk, A Mission Born of Mystery. And some of those questions are questions like, who am I? Who am I? How do I know what I know? What authority do I follow? And who or what is in charge? Who or what is in charge of me and the choices that I have to make? And what happens in my life? What is my purpose? What is it that sustains my self-worth? What is my purpose? And another question about meaning, what does my death mean? What does it mean in the scheme of things? What kind of mark will I leave behind? We're always trying to figure out how to give our lives meaning, how to get some guidance for our choices, how to help us understand others. What can do that? And a lot of times, our past informs our present. The things that we remember are memories of people and places and times. They're testaments to lives and lessons learned. And you know and I know how messy and tangled lives can be, how broken and how glorious at the same time. And that brokenness teaches us lessons that need to be unlearned as well. You see, the folks that we remember, how they lived and how they died, affects our own lives now, in the here and now. And that's part of the message of All Souls. I have a story to share. In 1924, when my dad was 8 years old, he became very, very sick. He remembered it like a dream. And in his dream, he was drowning. My dad had come down with diphtheria. The disease was coating his nostrils and his throat, and it was also affecting the muscles that he used to breathe. His parents were Russian immigrants living in the Lower East Side of New York City, and they knew that this was serious. The disease had been a scourge in New York City for years, particularly for children. A few years beforehand, diphtheria was recorded by over 200,000 people in the United States. The survival rate was pretty low for children under 5. As children got over, they had more capacity to resist it, but still about 1 in 10 would die from diphtheria. And my dad was very ill. In my grandmother's culture, parents were not supposed to dote on their children because it would invite bad luck. Something would happen to a child if a parent cared too much about the child. But in the day or two after he fell ill and things weren't getting better, she prayed and she feared for him, her boy, and for her girl, his little sister. Like everything else in life, she was always braced to lose what she loved. That was the way it was. My grandfather went out on the 3rd night to find a doctor, and he did succeed in finding somebody who would come back to the apartment with him. The doctor stayed through the crisis and for the entire night. He probably saved my dad's life, and my grandparents never forgot him. By 1927, 3 years later, over 80,000 city children had been immunized. And in the years since immunization began in the early 1900s, nationwide, the number of cases have dropped to almost nothing. The ones who have had it, the few, like less than 100, have either not been immunized or they hadn't completed their immunization sequence. So they were only partially protected. Actually, between 2004 and 2008, there were no recorded cases in the United States at all. I'm here today with you because a tired and overworked doctor sat through the hours of the night nursing a boy, and the boy lived until morning. And what also happened that night is that my grandmother learned to hope. After countless generations of women who expected only to endure life had instructed her in the ways of the world, my grandmother left that behind and learned to hope. My dad's sister never did come down with the disease. She received a vaccination when it was finally delivered to their school. And you and millions of other children are here today because your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents received vaccines against the illnesses that killed children in their day. Diphtheria and polio and mumps and pertussis and rubella and tetanus and a host of other infections that are just a memory for most of us right now, a memory that we inherited from our ancestors. I tell you this story today because we are in the midst of another health crisis, yet another virus that steals the breath. And because of my dad's story, I have chosen to have my children vaccinated as I was, and I will seek the vaccine to this pandemic virus when it becomes available. And I do this because I've learned to hope, and I've learned to trust in doctors who do their utmost to replace fear with hope. Replacing fear with hope. Replacing fear with love is not a bad way to look at how a person might fit in the world. But it is a challenge to hope. I understand my grandmother, how she fought to be able to hope in the midst of being sure that she was going to lose her child. Those are the lessons that I learned and that I remember for you today. So how have the people in your past informed your present? In a few minutes, we'll return to looking ahead, anticipating the week to come, the years to come. But maybe, just maybe, there might be something to also think about that will replace fear with hope, that will replace fear with love. May it be so.